Long before the emergence of a Polish state, the fertile lands between the Oder and the Dnieper witnessed the gradual formation of what we now recognize as the Slavic peoples. In the early centuries of the first millennium CE, these lands were a mosaic of forests, rivers, and marshes that concealed scattered villages and tribal communities. Archaeological findings, from rustic wooden dwellings to simple cremation urns, reveal a society shaped by subsistence farming, hunting, and trade along rivers that connected them to distant worlds. Early Slavic pottery, crude yet distinctive, and iron tools excavated across Central Europe testify to the shared cultural horizon slowly emerging among these diverse groups. Out of this shared ancestry arose the vivid legends of Lech, Czech, and Rus, the three brothers who, as medieval chroniclers wrote centuries later, chose their paths at a fork in the forest, each heading toward lands they would make their own. Though mythical, this tale preserved in the Polish Chronicle of Gallus Anonymous and later sources reflects a deeper historical process: the dispersal of West, East, and South Slavs into the geographic spaces that would eventually become Poland, Bohemia, and the Rus principalities. The symbolism of the white eagle seen by Lech, which would one day become the emblem of the Polish kingdom, rooted these people to the landscape with a sense of divine providence. Yet modern scholarship reveals that these migrations were neither a single event nor the story of a few heroic founders. Genetic studies and comparative linguistics suggest that Slavic expansion was gradual and complex, driven by demographic growth and adaptation to diverse ecologies. Around the 6th and 7th centuries, as the Roman Empire crumbled and Germanic and nomadic groups shifted across Europe, Slavic-speaking communities moved into vacant or sparsely settled territories. This dispersal, supported by archaeological evidence of settlement patterns and farming implements found across present-day Poland, marked the birth of new identities. By weaving together the material record with the myths told centuries later, we gain a clearer, richer portrait, a landscape where small, self-sufficient villages coalesced into larger tribal alliances, where cultural exchange along rivers and trade routes slowly created linguistic and ritual commonalities, and where stories like those of Lech, Czech, and Rus emerged to explain these deep-seated connections. Even before a single Polish prince would rise to power, these early centuries set the stage for the enduring historical journey that would define the Polish nation. In the wake of these early stirrings of identity and migration, the West Slavs gradually found themselves bound together under a single ambitious leader. Mieszko, chief of the Polans, rose in the mid-10th century as a ruler who grasped that enduring power lay not only in war and alliance, but in weaving the scattered clans into one political fabric, steadily subduing rival tribes and forging bonds with those who would submit peacefully. He shaped the first recognizable Polish realm. And when Mieszko took the bold step of accepting baptism in 966, he was not simply changing his faith, he was signaling his realm's entry into the Christian Commonwealth of Europe, tethering these lands to a grander political and cultural order. This Christianization, performed in alliance with Bohemia and under the gaze of the Latin West, introduced new rituals and scribes, new symbols of kingship, and a sense of purpose that reached beyond the forest clearings and wooden hill forts of his ancestors. That decisive embrace of Christianity marked the true beginning of the Piast dynasty and the patient work of state building. The tools of Latin literacy and church organization became instruments of administration and law, allowing Mieszko and his successors to knit together what had been a loose tribal coalition into a coherent Polish state. Recognition of this new order came most visibly at the Congress of Gniezno in the year 1000, when Emperor Otto III himself paid homage at the tomb of Saint Adalbert and acknowledged Bolesław Chrobry, Mieszko's son and heir, as a ruler of equal standing. The Congress was not only a spiritual pilgrimage, it was a diplomatic triumph that placed Poland firmly on the European map, sanctioned by the Holy Roman Empire and the papacy alike. From that moment onward, the Piasts guided Poland into an era of royal ambition and lasting sovereignty. Bolesław the Brave, proud son of Mieszko, continued his father's work with boldness and skill. In 1025, the same year of his death, he secured his own coronation as the first king of Poland, a culmination of decades of painstaking statecraft and martial vigor. His crown was more than a personal accolade. It was a symbol of a polity that had come of age. Under his reign, Poland had stepped from the shadow of tribal past into the light of European kingship, poised to face a turbulent world with a banner and a future all its own. In the turbulent decades after Bolesław the Brave's glorious reign, Poland was plunged into chaos as the fragile foundations of its new state began to crack. The crisis of the 1030s shattered the fragile order painstakingly built by Mieszko and his son. Pagan uprisings surged like a tide across the countryside as resentful nobles and commoners rose against Christian authority. Foreign invasions followed, most devastatingly the attack of Bretislaus of Bohemia, who sacked Gniezno and carried off sacred relics. The kingdom seemed to collapse into dust, its rulers driven into exile, and its people scattered and fearful as old beliefs clawed back the ground that Christianity had so recently claimed. Yet even in this dark hour, Poland would find its savior in Casimir I, aptly called the Restorer. Returning from exile around 1039, he undertook the painstaking work of reclaiming his shattered inheritance. With careful diplomacy and the support of the German emperor, Casimir rebuilt alliances, restored churches, and revived the administrative structures that had been lost in the collapse. The capital shifted to Kraków, a city that would come to embody the endurance of the Piasts. Under his reign, order slowly took root once more, and the Christian faith, shaken but unbroken, regained its hold over a reborn Polish realm. That newfound stability was fragile. Casimir's son, Bolesław II the Bold, ascended with grand ambitions and great prowess in war, but his reign was stained by a bitter conflict with Bishop Stanislaus of Kraków. In 1079, after a dramatic and mysterious confrontation, tradition tells of a public accusation of tyranny and adultery. Bolesław ordered the bishop's execution. This shocking sacrilege outraged both nobles and clergy. Some sources describe the king himself wielding the blade. Condemned by his peers in the church alike, Bolesław was forced into exile and died far from home. The murder of Stanislaus left a deep scar and would echo as a moral lesson in Polish political culture for generations. Amid this tempest, Władysław I Herman, more cautious and less assertive, took up the throne. His reign was marked by political intrigue and an increasing reliance on powerful nobles and palatines who pulled the strings of power. It was his son, Bolesław III Rymuth, who revived Polish ambitions once more, expanding influence into Pomerania and creating a state that was militarily active and diplomatically engaged with its neighbors. But even Bolesław III could not halt the centrifugal forces that had been building within his realm. Seeking to avoid fraternal strife among his sons after his death, he outlined his testament of 1138, a well-meaning blueprint that divided Poland into separate hereditary provinces, with a senior prince governing from Kraków. That testament, intended to preserve unity, instead became the source of centuries of fragmentation. The seigniorate system failed as rival Piast princes contested power, and regional identities began to crystallize into distinct duchies. Poland, once united under a single dynasty, now stood at the threshold of a new era, an era of division and disunity that would shape its destiny for generations to come. As Poland's fractured duchies navigated the turbulence of the 12th and 13th centuries, one city began to rise above the rest, drawing together the scattered hopes of a people in search of coherence. Kraków, perched along the Vistula and blessed by fertile lands and trade routes, gradually emerged as the political and cultural heart of these divided lands. Dukes and bishops lavished it with churches and royal halls, scholars and craftsmen gathered in its winding streets, and pilgrims journeyed to its sacred relics. Even as the land was divided into autonomous Piast fiefdoms, Kraków became the unspoken center around which all looked for unity, a sanctuary of tradition and a beacon of the future. Yet the prosperity of this burgeoning city and its fragile surroundings could not shield them from one of the most devastating cataclysms to descend upon Europe: the Mongol invasions. In 1241, at the Battle of Legnica, Cilician knights and Templar brothers made a courageous stand against the thundering tide of horsemen from the east. The Poles fought with valor and desperate unity, but they were overwhelmed by the disciplined, elusive tactics of the Mongols. Prince Henry the Pious fell that day, and though the Mongols withdrew after ravaging Silesia and Lesser Poland, their raids left deep scars and a lasting fear in every village and town. In the years that followed, occasional raids reminded the Poles that they dwelt forever on a volatile frontier between East and West. Yet, even amid these threats, the landscape of the realm was transforming. The German Magdeburg Law took root in Poland like a fruitful seed scattered across a plowed field, bringing a wave of urban charters and the promise of self-government to towns large and small. market squares thrived, guilds arose, and commerce began to bind together a fragmented country with silver and trade, rather than swords alone. The sound of hammers in workshops and the chatter of foreign merchants heralded a new era in which towns became engines of cultural exchange and nascent civic pride. It was in this period of reordering and growth that the Teutonic Order appeared, invited by Duke Conrad of Masovia in 1226 to fight pagan Prussians, but soon becoming a power unto themselves. Cloaked in white mantles marked with black crosses, the knights built stone fortresses along the Baltic, transforming themselves from mere crusaders into a territorial state that would challenge Poland and its neighbors for centuries to come. The Order's arrival intertwined faith with iron, zeal with ambition, and placed yet another weight upon the complex balance of powers that would shape the fate of Central Europe. Amid these shifting tides, Cracov's cultural ascent, the Mongol terror, the march of Magdeburg law across the land, and the stern shadow of the Teutonic Knights, Poland began to take on the intricate contours of a kingdom poised between tradition and change, forever looking inward for strength and outward to a wider, more unpredictable world. Amid the fractious splintering of the Piast dynasty, the centuries-long struggle for unity unfolded like a slow-burning saga of ambition, rivalry, and resilience. The once unified realm cleaved by the testament of Bolesław III splintered into competing duchies ruled by rival Piast dukes, each vying for power and influence. These internecine conflicts, punctuated by shifting alliances and fleeting truces, became the crucible in which the Polish identity was tested and reforged. Though division threatened the very survival of the state, it also nurtured a fierce determination to restore cohesion and sovereignty in a land buffeted by external threats and internal discord. At the heart of this struggle rose Władysław I the Elbow High, a figure whose sobriquet belied the formidable force he embodied. Through years of tactical patience, diplomatic maneuvering, and unrelenting warfare, Władysław chipped away at the fragmented political landscape. His relentless campaign to reunite the Polish duchies was more than mere conquest. It was a quest to rekindle the vision of a singular Polish kingdom that had been lost to dynastic squabbles. His coronation in 1320 marked a decisive milestone, symbolizing the first genuine reconstitution of the Polish crown after nearly 2 centuries of fragmentation. Yet this fragile unity would soon be tested by the rising menace of the Teutonic Order, whose fortified presence in the north cast a long shadow over Poland's aspirations. The Battle of Płock in 1331 emerged as the first major clash between Polish forces and the militarized order, a brutal contest of wills that underscored the growing tension between the two powers. Though the battle was tactically indecisive, it was a symbolic assertion of Polish resilience against the aggressive encroachment of the Teutonic Knights, marking the beginning of a protracted struggle that would shape the region's geopolitical landscape for generations. Following Władysław's hard-won reunification, Casimir III, known to history as Casimir the Great, ascended to the throne as the last of the Piast kings. His reign from 1333 to 1370 was a remarkable period of consolidation, legal reform, and economic growth that transformed the kingdom's foundations. Recognizing the fragility of his predecessor's achievements, Casimir embarked on a visionary program to modernize the state. He codified laws to bring order to the chaotic patchwork of feudal customs, fostered urban development through granting city charters, and strengthened royal authority while cultivating alliances with neighboring powers. His founding of the University of Krakow in 1364 not only elevated the kingdom's intellectual life, but also signaled Poland's emergence as a significant cultural and educational center in Europe. Casimir's legacy was not merely one of military might or political consolidation, but of laying the durable institutional and economic groundwork for a future Polish kingdom, one that balanced the demands of tradition with the necessity of reform. His reign closed the chapter on the early Piast era and opened the doors to a renaissance of Polish statehood, marked by cautious strength and a vision that reached far beyond the battlefield. In the mid-14th century, amid the flickering candlelight of medieval Europe, Krakow blossomed into a beacon of learning and culture with the founding of the University of Krakow in 1364. Scholars gathered here from across the continent, bringing with them new ideas in theology, law, and the arts, igniting a flame of enlightenment that would illuminate the Polish realm for centuries. The university became a crucible where tradition met innovation, cultivating a generation of thinkers and leaders equipped to navigate the complexities of a rapidly changing world. Parallel to this cultural flowering was a remarkable social experiment. The Jewish Charter of Rights, often cited as one of the earliest declarations of tolerance in medieval Europe. Issued by Casimir the Great, this charter guaranteed protections and privileges to Jewish communities within Poland, granting them a degree of autonomy unprecedented in many other lands. It was not merely a pragmatic measure to encourage economic growth through Jewish merchants and craftsmen, but a profound statement of coexistence amid an era often defined by religious intolerance. This early embrace of pluralism would become a defining characteristic of Polish society, fostering a diverse cultural mosaic that enriched its urban centers and countryside alike. The closing years of the 14th century brought a transformative political and spiritual alliance that would reshape Eastern Europe, the Union of Kraków in 1385. When the Lithuanian Grand Duke Jogaila pledged himself to Queen Jadwiga of Poland in marriage, it was not just a union of two rulers, but a fusion of two great realms. This marriage forged the foundation of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, one of the largest and most influential states in Europe for centuries to come. Jogaila's acceptance of Christianity, a condition of the union, marked the Christianization of Lithuania, the last pagan bastion in Europe, integrating its vast lands and peoples into the Western Christian fold and dramatically expanding Poland's sphere of influence. Together, these milestones, an academic renaissance, an early embrace of religious tolerance, and the forging of a grand dynastic union, embodied Poland's emergence as a dynamic crossroads between East and West. They heralded a new chapter where knowledge, faith, and political vision intertwined, setting the stage for the complex and vibrant history that was to follow. The dawn of the 15th century witnessed a turning point that resonated far beyond the fields of Central Europe. The Battle of Grunwald in 1410, where the Polish-Lithuanian forces delivered a shattering blow to the once mighty Teutonic Order. This confrontation was more than a mere clash of armies. It was a symbolic triumph of a united Eastern European alliance against a crusading power that sought to dominate the Baltic and suppress the indigenous peoples and states. The resounding defeat fractured the Teutonic Knights' grip and shifted the balance of power, emboldening Poland and Lithuania to assert their sovereignty and secure their borders. Not content with military victories alone, the Polish realm extended its defense of freedoms into the realm of ideas and conscience. During the Council of Constance, 1414 to 1418, Polish representatives stood firmly to defend religious tolerance in a Europe rife with sectarian conflict. This was a remarkable stance, particularly amid the Church's efforts to suppress dissent and enforce orthodoxy. Poland's advocacy underscored an emerging ethos of coexistence, rooted in its diverse population and pragmatic governance. The long shadow of the Teutonic Order persisted, culminating in the 13 Years' War, 1454 to 1466, a protracted and bitter struggle that tested the resilience of Polish diplomacy and military might. The conflict ended with the Second Peace of Thorn, a treaty that significantly expanded Poland's dominion by bringing Royal Prussia firmly into its fold. This territorial gain not only enhanced Poland's strategic position, but also enriched its cultural and economic life through access to vital Baltic ports and trade networks. This period also marked the flourishing of the Jagiellonian dynasty, whose rule would preside over a renaissance in Polish culture and intellectual life. The University of Kraków, already a beacon of learning, became a vibrant European center, attracting scholars and fostering luminaries like Nicholas Copernicus, whose heliocentric vision would forever alter humanity's understanding of the cosmos. The poetic voices of Mikołaj Reć and Jan Kochanowski elevated Polish literature, crafting works that intertwined national identity with humanist ideals, weaving Poland into the broader tapestry of Renaissance Europe. Parallel to these cultural achievements was the rise of the Szlachta, the Polish nobility, whose influence and self-perception deepened through the ideology of Sarmatism. This noble class fashioned a distinct identity rooted in ancestral valor and the defense of liberty, setting Poland apart from the absolutist monarchies of the West. Their political power was codified in the Nihil Novi Act of 1505, which declared that no new laws could be enacted without their consent, marking the birth of Poland's noble democracy, a unique system balancing monarchy and aristocratic privilege. The spirit of tolerance, a thread woven through centuries of Polish history, found its crowning expression in the Warsaw Confederation of 1573. This groundbreaking act guaranteed religious freedom to Catholics, Protestants, Jews, and others, creating a haven of pluralism rare in early modern Europe. The spread of the Reformation and the acceptance of diverse faiths, Jews, Muslims, Protestants, became part of Poland's complex social fabric, reflecting a political culture that valued peace and coexistence amidst difference. Together, these developments crafted a Poland that was intellectually vibrant, politically innovative, and culturally rich, a realm where battles were fought not only on the field but in the halls of learning and the chambers of tolerance. The nation stood at the cusp of modernity, a proud guardian of freedom and diversity in a continent often torn by division. In 1569, the Union of Lublin forged an unprecedented political union between the Kingdom of Poland and the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, birthing the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, a sprawling federation that became one of the largest and most diverse states in Europe. This union was not merely a dynastic marriage, but a conscious melding of two powerful entities into a single political organism, characterized by a unique dual structure that balanced the autonomy of each partner with a shared monarch and a common parliament, the Sejm. This bicameral assembly, dominated by the Szlachta, embodied the ideals of noble democracy, where the voices of the landed aristocracy shaped laws, governance, and foreign policy, often with passionate debate and fierce contestation. The Commonwealth's political system was revolutionary yet fragile. Its elective monarchy, designed to prevent hereditary absolutism, invited foreign princes and magnates to vie for the throne, creating openings for external influence and internal factionalism. The crown's authority was often circumscribed by the powerful nobility who jealously guarded their privileges, leading to political paralysis and the infamous liberum veto, which allowed any single deputy to dissolve the Sejm's proceedings. This decentralized power structure, while a bastion of noble freedoms, also sowed seeds of anarchy, weakening the state's ability to respond decisively to crises. These tensions erupted in the Zebrzydowski Rebellion between 1606 and 1609, where segments of the nobility rose against King Sigismund III Vasa, challenging his attempts to strengthen royal prerogatives and curb magnate excesses. The rebellion underscored the volatile balance between monarchy and nobility, highlighting the deep fractures within the Commonwealth's political fabric, a microcosm of the broader struggle to maintain unity amid competing visions of power and governance. Amid this internal tumult, the Commonwealth faced relentless external pressures from neighboring powers. Wars with Russia, Sweden, and the Ottoman Empire raged across its vast territories, testing its military resilience and diplomatic dexterity. The conflict with Russia was marked by fluctuating fortunes over borderlands and influence in Eastern Europe, while the protracted Swedish invasions, later known as the Deluge, devastated the land, sowing destruction and despair. Simultaneously, the southern borders were constantly threatened by Ottoman incursions and Tatar raids, forcing the Commonwealth to marshal all its resources in defense of its sovereignty. Thus, the Union of Lublin heralded an era of grandeur and complexity, a state of remarkable cultural and political innovation shadowed by structural fragility. The Commonwealth stood as a bold experiment in noble democracy and multinational cooperation, yet it was a realm perpetually balancing on the knife's edge between liberty and chaos, strength and vulnerability, a paradox that would define its destiny in the centuries to come. In the turbulent early 17th century, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth reached its zenith of military ambition with the stunning Polish victory at Moscow in 1610. For a brief electrifying moment, the red walls of the Kremlin flew the banner of the Commonwealth, signaling not just a military triumph, but a rare assertion of Polish power deep into the heart of Russia. This occupation was the apex of the Polish-Muscovite War, a conflict born from dynastic rivalry and regional ambition. Yet, the victory was fleeting. Internal Russian resistance and shifting alliances soon expelled the Commonwealth's forces, underscoring the tenuous nature of Poland's eastern advances. And, foreshadowing the protracted struggles to come, the mid-17th century brought one of the darkest chapters in Polish history, known simply as the Deluge, 1648 to 1667. This era of devastation began with the Khmelnytsky uprising, a fierce rebellion of Cossacks and Ruthenian peasants against Polish noble domination and religious oppression. The uprising tore through the southeastern borderlands, igniting ethnic and religious fault lines and merging into wider conflicts involving the Swedish invasion, which poured across the Commonwealth like a tidal wave. The Swedes, exploiting internal weakness, ravaged cities, looted churches, and brought the nation to its knees. The population endured famine, plague, and displacement, with the very fabric of society fraying under the weight of relentless war. Yet amid this catastrophe, the defense of Jasna Gora Monastery in 1655 emerged as a powerful beacon of spiritual and national resilience. The small contingent of monks and soldiers repelled the Swedish siege, inspiring a wave of patriotic fervor and resistance. Jasna Gora became a symbol not merely of faith, but of Poland itself, unyielding, sacred, and defiant in the face of annihilation. This spiritual resistance infused the Polish people with hope, rallying the Szlachta and peasantry alike to reclaim their homeland. In the midst of these convulsions, the Treaty of Hediac in 1658 sought to address the complex ethnic mosaic of the Commonwealth by proposing a tripartite federation including Ruthenia as an equal partner alongside Poland and Lithuania. It was an ambitious attempt at political innovation, aiming to heal wounds and create a more inclusive state. However, entrenched opposition from Polish nobility and ongoing conflicts rendered the treaty ineffective, its promise unfulfilled, and its vision unrealized. The century closed with the rise of Jan III Sobieski, a military genius whose leadership culminated in the legendary Battle of Vienna in 1683. As Ottoman forces besieged the gates of the Habsburg capital, Sobieski's relief army thundered into history, delivering a decisive blow that turned the tide of European resistance against Ottoman expansion. His victory was more than military. It was a defining moment for the Commonwealth's role as a bulwark of Christendom, intertwining Poland's destiny with that of Europe itself. Sobieski's triumph rekindled pride and symbolized the enduring spirit of a nation battered but unbroken, standing at the crossroads of East and West. The 17th century's triumphs gave way to a cultural zenith in Poland marked by the flourishing of Sarmatism, a noble ethos that celebrated the Szlachta's unique identity, blending chivalric valor, ornate fashion, and a proud, often mythologized connection to ancient Sarmatian warriors. This cultural flowering produced a distinct Polish Baroque, suffused with grand literature, art, and architecture, reflecting both a confident nobility and a society steeped in tradition. It was the final, radiant blossoming of a commonwealth that, despite its internal contradictions, radiated influence across Central and Eastern Europe. Yet beneath this shimmering surface, deep fractures gnawed at the state's foundations. The Librum Veto, a parliamentary tool allowing any single deputy to dissolve the same, became a weapon of paralysis, fostering factionalism and enabling foreign powers to exploit Poland's political chaos. What began as a safeguard of noble freedoms evolved into a systemic breakdown, turning governance into a battleground of competing magnates and foreign intrigues. The once glorious Commonwealth found itself increasingly impotent, unable to enact reforms or defend its sovereignty effectively. This internal collapse coincided with the rise of neighboring powers, Russia, Prussia, and Austria, whose growing strength and ambitions cast a long shadow over Polish affairs. These empires infiltrated the Commonwealth's politics through diplomacy, bribery, and outright intervention, gradually eroding its independence. The fragile institutions that had once balanced noble privilege and monarchy buckled under external pressure and internal decay. By 1772, this slow erosion culminated in the First Partition, a devastating act where Poland's neighbors carved off vast swaths of its territory, marking the beginning of the nation's disappearance from the map. This geopolitical tragedy stunned Europe and marked the start of a relentless process of dismemberment. In response, Polish patriots sought renewal in reform. The Constitution of May 3, 1791, Europe's first modern written constitution, offered a bold, enlightened vision to strengthen the monarchy, limit noble excesses, and modernize the state. Yet its reforms came too late to reverse the tide. The constitution's promise was crushed by the Second Partition in 1793, stripping more land and autonomy. The Kosciuszko Uprising of 1794 followed, a desperate, heroic struggle led by Tadeusz Kościuszko, a symbol of Polish resistance and republican ideals. Though fierce and widespread, it could not halt the overwhelming forces arrayed against it. The final blow came with the Third Partition in 1795, when Poland was wiped from the map entirely, its sovereignty extinguished, its people divided among three empires. The Commonwealth ceased to exist as a political entity, its legacy swallowed by history, but its spirit enduring in the hearts of a dispersed and determined nation. This era marked not just the physical loss of a state, but the beginning of a long, painful struggle to preserve Polish identity under foreign domination, a testament to resilience that would echo through centuries to come. The partitions cast a long, heavy shadow over Polish life, fracturing the nation across three empires, Russia, Prussia, and Austria, each imposing its own system of oppression and assimilation. Yet, amid the harsh realities of foreign rule, Poles clung fiercely to their identity. Education became a battleground where cultural preservation was an act of defiance. Secret schools and underground literary circles flourished, nurturing a sense of Polishness rooted in language, history, and tradition. Despite censorship and persecution, the spirit of the nation endured in whispered lessons and forbidden books. The Napoleonic era briefly rekindled hope with the creation of the Duchy of Warsaw, 1807 to 1815, a French-backed Polish state that resurrected aspirations for sovereignty. Though short-lived, it rekindled the flame of independence and forged a generation of Polish officers and patriots who would carry the struggle forward. The Congress of Vienna, however, dashed these hopes by establishing Congress Poland, a nominally autonomous kingdom tethered firmly to Russian control, its freedoms steadily stripped away. The November Uprising of 1830-31 was a fierce, if ultimately doomed, assertion of national will against Tsarist repression. Young officers, students, and townsfolk rose with dreams of liberty, but the might of the Russian Empire proved overwhelming. The brutal aftermath ushered in waves of repression, censorship, and exile. Yet it also seeded a new cultural phenomenon, Romantic nationalism. Poets like Juliusz Slowacki and Adam Mickiewicz wove the Polish struggle into epics of heroic sacrifice, while composers like Chopin transformed sorrow and hope into music that spoke to the soul of a nation under siege. The January Uprising of 1863-64 echoed these themes. A widespread insurrection born from desperate yearning for freedom. Though it was crushed with ruthless efficiency, the uprising galvanized the population's resolve and deepened the sense of Polish identity as a moral and spiritual cause. In its wake, the Russian Empire intensified efforts at Russification, implementing laws to eradicate Polish language, religion, and customs. Meanwhile, Prussia's Kulturkampf sought to suppress Polish Catholicism and culture, aiming to Germanize the population. Despite the crushing weight of oppression, Polish society responded with resilience, embracing organic work, a philosophy of grassroots development in education, economy, and culture. This slow, steady resistance kept alive the hope of resurrection, transforming Poland from a battlefield of foreign ambitions into a cradle of national spirit, preparing for the moment when freedom might once again dawn. In the shadow of failed uprisings and crushing repression, Polish positivism emerged as a pragmatic beacon of hope, a philosophy of organic work that rejected armed revolt in favor of patient, diligent cultivation of society from the ground up. Intellectuals and activists embraced education, economic development, and cultural preservation as the means to strengthen the nation, laying the foundation for eventual rebirth. This era nurtured schools, libraries, and cooperative movements, embedding resilience within the fabric of Polish life, even as foreign powers sought to erase it. The cataclysm of World War I shattered empires and redrawed borders with ruthless force. As Austria, Hungary, Russia, and Germany faltered, the opportunity for Polish independence, long a distant dream, surged toward reality. On November 11, 1918, Poland's resurrection was proclaimed, a phoenix rising from over a century of partitions, exile, and cultural resistance. The Second Republic faced daunting challenges, rebuilding war-torn lands, integrating diverse regions, and forging a cohesive national identity from a patchwork of former imperial territories. Central to this turbulent rebirth was Józef Piłsudski, a figure of towering vision and determination. His leadership in the Polish-Soviet War culminated in the legendary miracle on the Vistula in 1920, when the newly formed Polish army halted the westward advance of Bolshevik forces, arguably saving not just Poland, but the future of Europe from communist domination. This stunning victory etched Piłsudski's name into history and symbolized Poland's resolve to defend its sovereignty fiercely. Yet the Second Republic was a fragile creation. It grappled with political instability, economic hardship, and the complex tapestry of minorities: Jews, Ukrainians, Belarusians, Germans, each with their own hopes and grievances. The nation's culture blossomed amid this complexity, with vibrant literature, arts, and intellectual life. But the challenges of governance and social cohesion remained ever present. The interwar years were thus a crucible of hope and hardship, a brief shining moment in Polish history where the dream of freedom was realized but had yet to find secure footing in a volatile world. On September 1st, 1939, the thunderous roar of German tanks and planes shattered the fragile peace of Europe as the Nazi war machine descended upon Poland, igniting the devastating blaze of World War II. Barely 2 weeks later, on September 17th, the Soviet Red Army crossed Poland's eastern borders, sealing the country in a brutal pincer of occupation. This double invasion carved Poland into shadows, its sovereignty extinguished under the iron boots of two totalitarian regimes, each intent on annihilation and control. Under the crushing weight of occupation, Poland's spirit did not yield. A vast clandestine resistance took shape, one of the most sophisticated in all of Europe, culminating in the Polish underground state, a unique phenomenon where secret courts, schools, and a government in exile orchestrated a defiant stand against tyranny. From the forests and cities, countless Poles risked everything to preserve their nation's soul, to resist, to fight, and to survive. Yet no story of this era can be told without confronting the Holocaust, the catastrophic tragedy that claimed the lives of 3 million Polish Jews, decimating centuries-old communities. Ghettos, death camps, and mass executions became the grim landscape of systematic annihilation. In 1943, the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising ignited as a blazing testament to courage and resistance, where Jewish fighters, facing overwhelming odds, chose defiance over death. Their valor echoed through history, a beacon of human dignity amid unspeakable horror. A year later, the Warsaw Uprising of 1944 saw the Polish Home Army rise against Nazi occupation, seeking to liberate their city before Soviet forces could impose their own rule. For 63 harrowing days, the city became a crucible of heroic struggle and heartbreaking betrayal as the Red Army halted beyond the Vistula, allowing the Germans to crush the rebellion brutally. The uprising's failure left Warsaw in ruins and its population decimated, a poignant symbol of Poland's tragic predicament caught between two ruthless powers. The war's end did not bring freedom, but a bitter betrayal. At Yalta, in 1945, the Western Allies, prioritizing geopolitical balance over Poland's independence, tacitly consented to Soviet domination. Thus began the era of the People's Republic of Poland, PRL, a Stalinist state where political repression, show trials, censorship, and secret police crushed dissent. Yet, even beneath this oppressive regime, the embers of Polish identity smoldered, ready to ignite again in pursuit of liberty. The iron grip of Stalinism tightened over Poland in the aftermath of World War II, casting a long shadow of fear and oppression across the nation. Show trials became grim theater, where political enemies were paraded and condemned in scripted spectacles designed to silence dissent and legitimize a brutal regime. The secret police prowled relentlessly, rooting out real and imagined opponents, while censorship strangled free expression, erasing voices that dared to challenge the imposed orthodoxy. Under this suffocating regime, the Polish spirit endured, concealed beneath the surface like embers waiting to spark. By 1956, the cracks in this oppressive facade began to show. The Poznan protests erupted as workers demanded dignity and better conditions, their courageous outcry reverberating beyond the city's factories. Though crushed, the protests forced the regime to partially relax its hold. marking the first visible fissures in the monolith of communist control. Yet everyday life in the People's Republic of Poland remained harsh. Endless queues for scarce goods, a thriving black market born from necessity, and a vibrant underground culture where art, music, and literature flourished in defiance, preserving identity and hope in the shadows. Amid these trials, a beacon arose with the election of a Pole to the papacy in 1978. John Paul II's ascension was not just a religious milestone, but a profound cultural and political catalyst. His impassioned calls for human dignity, freedom, and solidarity resonated deeply with a nation yearning for liberation, inspiring millions and igniting a moral revolution beneath the veneer of communist rule. The wave of change surged into the Solidarity movement of 1980, a groundbreaking trade union that transcended labor rights to become a broad social force for reform and national renewal. Led by figures like Lech Wałęsa, Solidarity embodied the collective courage of a society refusing to be crushed. Yet the regime's reaction was swift and brutal. Martial law was declared in 1981, imprisoning activists and suppressing freedoms in a desperate attempt to extinguish the growing flame of resistance. Despite repression, the tide of history could not be stemmed. Throughout the 1980s, relentless activism combined with shifting international winds and economic crises culminated in the Round Table Talks of 1989. These unprecedented negotiations between communist authorities and opposition leaders paved the way for semi-free elections, marking the beginning of the end for the People's Republic. Poland's peaceful revolution not only restored democracy, but ignited a transformative wave that would ripple across Eastern Europe, reclaiming freedom and sovereignty after decades of darkness. The dawn of the 1990s cast Poland into a tempest of economic upheaval and political uncertainty as it emerged from decades of communist rule. The introduction of shock therapy reforms, rapid privatization, market liberalization, and austerity transformed the economy overnight, unleashing both opportunity and hardship. Factories closed, unemployment soared, and social safety nets frayed, leaving many adrift in the sudden chaos of capitalism. Yet these painful transitions were the price paid for freedom, laying the groundwork for a market economy and democratic governance even as the political landscape fractured into competing visions of Poland's future. By the close of the decade, Poland had firmly reoriented itself toward the West. NATO membership in 1999 was a watershed moment, symbolizing Poland's commitment to collective security and integration into Euro-Atlantic structures after a century of vulnerability and shifting alliances. This new alliance promised protection and political clout, anchoring Poland in a community of democratic nations wary of resurgent threats from the East. The trajectory continued upward with European Union accession in 2004, opening borders, markets, and opportunities. Poland's economy surged, modern infrastructure blossomed, and millions embraced new freedoms of travel and trade. Yet this rapid growth was shadowed by simmering tensions between urban and rural, old and young, progressive and conservative, reflecting deeper questions about identity and the country's path forward. In this complex 21st century Poland, the nation occupies a delicate geopolitical role, bridging East and West. Energy security, border integrity, and defense remain paramount as Poland navigates pressures from Russia, the EU, and global powers. Meanwhile, the cultural sphere grapples with the past and present, wrestling with historical memory and national narrative in museums, literature, and public discourse, confronting painful legacies and celebrating resilience. Demographic challenges loom large. Population decline, fueled by low birth rates and waves of emigration, threaten the social fabric and economic vitality. Political polarization and rising populism amplify tensions within the democracy as debates over immigration, religion, and governance expose deep societal rifts. Yet, amid these trials, Poland's enduring dream pulses with complexity, a yearning for security, prosperity, and dignity, a struggle to reconcile its turbulent past with aspirations for a just, inclusive future. Caught between East and West, Poland's story is one of resilience and reinvention, a nation ever seeking its place in the modern world while holding fast to the legacy that shaped its soul. What the Polish dream is now is a question still unfolding, an epic in progress written by a people who have weathered storms and continue to rise hopeful and determined. Dziękuję. Like and subscribe for more knowledge.